Hello, welcome to the 66th edition of Drive Through Review. Today I'm going to talk about Core Worlds. It's a deck building game from Stronghold Games. It plays 2 to 5 players, and the box says an hour to 2 hours. And I would say when you play with more players, you're going to push that 2-hour mark, especially as you're learning the game. But with the 2-player, 3-player, you can probably get it done in under an hour, but probably an hour is a good bet. So if you saw my last video, which was my best of 2011 video, you'll know that I mentioned this. I almost put it in there, but I hadn't really played it at all, just a couple of times as I was making that video, but I really liked the game immediately. So spoiler alert for the end of this video. But the things haven't changed. It's grown on me. It's something that I'll just get to it now. I feel is ripe for expansions. I don't think it needs expansions at all. You're not going to feel like you've wasted your money or you didn't get your money's worth if you buy this game. But it's something that is, I think they've designed it with expansions. They've mentioned that in the rule book, and it's apparent from playing the game that I think that's the truth. So let me just show you a little bit about how it works, and I'll tell you a little bit more in detail about why I like the game. Okay, let's do a complete component rundown here of everything that comes in the game. Now, players are going to get these starting boards here, one board for each player, and you're basically tracking 2 resources on this board. You're tracking your energy with this token here on this track, and then the actions that will be available to you on your turn on this track. It also has some nice information about what some of the possible actions are on your turn on this side, and then along the top, it gives you mention of some of the end game scoring cards that are going to come out at the end of the game. So even as a new player, you can sit down and look at this and say, okay, I'm going to try to do maybe this approach, or based on the early cards that come up and how everybody else is playing the game, you can try to pick one of these approaches to try to get a big payoff at the end of the game, and that's kind of nice. Now, first thing you're going to do is shuffle up these Homeworld cards. So each player is going to have a different Homeworld card, which are effectively the same, but it's going to help determine who the start player is. So once you shuffle these out and deal them out to each player, you're going to see there's a little icon at the bottom there. And then you're going to take a starting deck that matches the icon there, and everybody's going to have pretty much the exact same starting deck. Everybody's going to have a unique hero, which is, doesn't have a whole ton of variability, but it's a nice little change to, at least change up your early game. Now here you can see these world cards are green with a little kind of green background. There's a couple other types of cards in the game. One is units, and those are all defined by these yellow cards here. And you can see a lot of these cards have a fleet power, which is like an air power, and a ground power. And these are going to be used to take over other worlds that come up in the game. Next, you've got blue cards here, which are tactics cards, and these are abilities. And you're going to use these units here basically to invade other worlds and conquer those worlds and bring those into your fold. And these tactic cards can be played sort of along with, as you do an invasion, you can play these to boost your invasion, or you can play them sort of independently as just for their ability and their effects. Now it's going to cost you actions and energy to play these cards, so you're going to need to manage these resources in addition to your sort of air and ground attack resources to play the game effectively. There's also another type of card, and that's a prestige card in red. And these only come up in the 9th and 10th round, in the last deck. In addition to these prestige cards, which are just basically to score points, you also have these end worlds or core worlds that are going to score you hopefully big points at the end of the game. Now the game also comes with some of these square energy tokens. I'll explain those in a little bit. Also comes with a start player marker, and this is going to move around the board as the game progresses. And then they're going to get these energy surge tokens. And these are to sort of balance the player order. So players can use this at any time in the game. It's a one-use deal to get free energy to boost up some of their abilities and get them out of a pinch. So these are going to be need to be judiciously used by the players. You don't really want to use these early, in my opinion. These are something you want to kind of save for the mid-late game. Now, before I get into the meat of the cards that you're going to be drafting and adding to your deck, I just wanted to quickly show you this little small set of cards. And these, you can see, all have a 0 at the bottom. And these probably should not be used your first maybe 1 or 2 games, because you need to become familiar, I think, with the game. But these can be drafted before you actually start playing to sort of change up and exchange with some of the cards that you start off with in your starting deck. So to keep these in mind, it's a real nice little addition. So, but I would say you need to play a couple games, in my opinion, first. Now here is where the meat of the cards that you're going to be drafting, adding to your deck, worlds that you're going to be conquering, are going to come out of here. Now you can see the game has a fixed number of rounds. There's a little round marker here, and it's going to move along every round until you get to the 10th round, at which time the game is over. Now at the start of each round, you're going to draw cards from the deck who matches wherever the round marker is. So here we're going to draw out a certain number of cards. And that's very simply based on the number of players in the game. This is really the only thing you're going to have to refer to in this rule book. It's actually really well done, by the way. But if you're playing a 2-player game, every round you'll draw 6 cards from whatever zone you happen to be in. And then, for example, with a 5-player game, you'll draw 12 cards. So let's say we're going to play a 2-player game. We'll pull out 6 cards here from the top of the deck. Now, you're going to have, once you pull these out, you need to check that there are at least a number of world cards and non-world cards equal to the number of players. So if we're playing a 2-player game, we're fine because we've got 3 world cards here, 3 green cards, and 3 non-green cards. So we don't have to draw any more cards. Now, if for some reason we had a whole mess of tactics and units here and not enough world cards, we'd keep drawing till we met the requirement of having the equal number to the number of players that are playing the game. So as these worlds are conquered and the cards are drafted, the unit cards and the tactics cards are drafted, you're going to have some cards possibly left over at the end of the round. What you'll do is you'll put energy tokens on the cards that remain. So if these 2 cards were the only ones left at the end of the round, these will actually effectively be 1 energy cheaper to acquire, so that whenever you actually conquered or drafted the card, you'll get a free energy back on your player board. So the very first thing that players are going to do in the round is they're going to draw 6 cards off the top of the deck. Now at the end of the turn, you're going to normally discard whatever's left in your hand, except you can keep 1 card for the next round. In that case, you only draw up to 6, so basically draw 5 cards. And then you're going to look and see how much energy your worlds that you control are going to generate. So at the start of the game, everybody's just going to generate 3 energy, so you move the track up to there. Secondly, depending on which round you're in, you'll look at the card and see how many actions each player is going to get. So as the rounds move along, this number of actions is actually going to increase. So after players have drawn their hand, set the correct energy and actions for the round, then starting with the start player, each player can take an action, and then play just moves around the board with each player taking an action. If you pass, you basically lose everything for the turn, and then you just wait for everybody else to finish. You usually don't have to wait very long because you're going to want to make the most of what you're doing. So there's not really a whole lot of downtime in the game. Except maybe when the cards first come out, and the first few times you play are like, what does this card do? What does this card do? Everybody's reading the text on the cards. So when it comes your turn to spend some of your action points and your energy, you basically have 5 options. You can draft a card, and that's usually going to be a unit or an ability card. You can deploy units, which will be next to your homeworld. You can put them out sort of in your tableau to be used to invade a world. So you'll be using those units to conquer a world and then bring that also into your tableau. And then you can spend abilities as an action, the blue cards. You can just spend them, like I said, as kind of a standalone thing. The other way you can use abilities is some of them will say during an invasion or when you're doing an invasion, you'll play them as you're doing the invasion to acquire the world. And the last thing you can do is pass. So let me just break these down a little bit more in detail and then go from there. So let's just look at these cards really quickly here. So the first thing you can notice is this 1 in the middle of the card. And that just means it comes out in the first deck in the game. Secondly, you've got your energy cost. So when you go to draft a card, you're always going to spend 1 action to draft a card, and then the energy cost is how much you have to pay in energy on your energy track to get the card into your deck. And these cards are going to go right into your discard pile, just like any kind of deck building game, to be brought back up and used later. Now if you look in the upper left hand corner of these cards, you'll see an energy cost here. So in this case of a unit, this is how much energy it's going to cost to deploy the card to be used in conquering worlds later. Whereas this card here is the energy cost to play it. Finally, we've got the fleet strength and the ground strength. And this will come into play when invading a world. You can see this one doesn't generate any here. It's a tactics card. If it does generate any, it'll also be described in the text. So it doesn't, you don't add the text and that together. You just look at it and it's sort of a quick reference to say, okay, this text will generate so much energy, but this is a variable amount. Now this here is going to give you 1 fleet strength, but 0 ground strength, so not too great. And as I said, this is used when conquering a world. So let's take a look at that now. So if you look at this world here, it has basically a cost to conquer it. You're going to need to spend 3 fleet strength and thankfully 0 ground strength to conquer this world. And this world is also going to generate 1 energy for you once you get it in front of you in the tableau. So that's going to be nice for later turns to, you know, get more energy to do more stuff. It's also going to be worth 1 point at the end of the game. Now, when you conquer a world, you're going to need to have these units in play in front of you. And then when you do the conquer world, you're going to discard those units and use them up and then place the world here. Now, one little extra activity you can do is if you had a Galactic Grunts or a Snub Fighter, which are basically your little starter weenie units. You can see the Snub Fighter has 1 fleet while the Galactic Grunts has 1 ground. And you can take one of those and bury it under that world to basically get this newbie card out of your deck so that you're not drawing these at the end of the game when they're not going to do very much for you. So you're basically just going to keep doing that. You're going to keep taking your turns doing actions. The round marker is going to move across the center zone. And then once you get to the end of round 10, then you're going to total up your points and see who won. Now let's quickly take a look at the last 2 types of cards here. You've got your prestige cards here, as well as your sort of the core worlds. And these are just basically the same as any other world, but they're a little bit special. And let's look at Indra here. So he's a big daddy. He takes 8 and 8 to conquer. And he'll give you 2 points plus whatever it says here. So plus 1 empire point for each tactic card in your empire. Now your empire is everything you have. Your deck, your tableau, which is actually your war zone, and all that stuff. So you're going to go in and count up all your tactics cards and add those up. And like I said before at the beginning, this is all spelled out here on this card. So you know that there's a core world that does this effect or this effect or this effect. So you're going to be able to shoot for that. If you're getting a lot of tactics cards, you know that when Indra comes up, you're going to want to have it. Now, if we look at this prestige card here, it also mentions the draft cost of this card, which is 8, is -1 for every core world in your war zone. So if you've got some core worlds already, you can draft this hopefully a little bit cheaper and get a free 3 points. Okay, hope you enjoyed the overview. Hope you can tell I like the game. You know, I did think about putting it on my top 10 for 2011. So like I said before, I think if I make a top 10 for 2012, this might be on it. The thing about this is I think you're going to take a couple of plays to really get into it. It starts off, there's a lot of cards, just a ton of cards to process, and it's not like where in Dominion, you know, I hate to keep going back to that, but you've got like 10 cards at a time that you can sort of deal with and then start adding new cards. But this one you're going to go through the whole sort of gamut, or most of it, the first time you play. So you'll be getting cards to, you know, kind of help you early game, and then kind of realize, oh, my deck's a little bit weak. You know, it's a little bit, how do you say, kind of bland. It doesn't really go strong in one direction or another. So it's going to take some plays to say, oh, this card would have been good for that, and this card would have been good for that, and that kind of thing. And there's a nice frustration to it, which I really like, where you have got to manage your energy, you've got to manage your actions. You've also got to manage, okay, am I going to spend that to draft cards, to get new cards? Am I going to spend that deploying cards? Am I going to hope that there's that world still around for another round? Because once a world or a card is out there for a second round, you put that energy marker on it. If it still has an energy marker on it for another round, then that card's going to go away completely. So people are going to kind of sort of push their luck a little bit with the other players to, you know, see if, you know, Billy going to take this card. You know, he might kind of want it, but he also might kind of want this card. So you've got to set yourself up for big turns, and the player order is going to kind of come into play there. So that's something you're going to need to be able to watch for. And they've got those energy surge tokens, which are very vital. You've got to use those. So there's a lot kind of going on. It's not a very complex game. You can only do a couple of different things, but the choices you're going to have to make. And as you play against, you know, people are going to get better at the game and know which cards are a little bit better for which situations. That's where the depth of the game really comes in. So that's a really great sign of a game that is a well done game, where it doesn't burden you down with a lot of complexity, but the complexity comes out with trying to win. So I really appreciate that. And the theme of it is nice. You're collecting the worlds and all that stuff. And it's one of the best thematic deck building, the best thematic deck building game I've played. So this one, it really comes across, the mechanics and the theme really fit well together, and I really like that. It's and the art is really good. The components are nice, and the little action boards are cool. Everything just is really, it's really well done package, and I think Stronghold has a good reputation. I've got Survive from them, and the components with all their games, Survive and Confusion and that stuff, is really well done. So they're keeping that abreast here with their component quality. So it kind of starting to ramble. I like the game. It's good. Can't wait for expansions. I think it'll be nice. Maybe some little tweaks to gameplay mechanics. Maybe some head versus head PvP. Maybe everybody asks for PvP in games all the time. But I think this might be a good game for that. Hope they don't mess with it too much. But I think this is a good game. There'll be hopefully some nice little expansions for it, and one that you can kind of break out. And it's a good gamer's game, but it's not real heavy. It's not going to hurt anybody's brain too bad. But it's fun. It's fun to get the ships out there and get the little combos going and all that stuff. So okay, thank you.